With the recent buffs to adaptive and aggressive frame snipers, as well as the perk pool refreshes brought with the Monument of Triumph update, I've decided to take a deep dive into sniper DPS to find out which snipers are worth keeping and how they stack up in D2's final sandbox. Now with the Monument of Triumph update, adaptive frame snipers received a 10% buff in PvE, while aggressives got a 15% buff to bring them more in line with rapid fire frames. However, the more interesting change that I think went under the radar is the addition of Redirection to many different snipers perk pools. If you're not aware, Redirection, while it can be annoying to set up, is a 100% damage perk. Previously, Lance Ephemeral from Desert Perpetual was the only viable DPS sniper with this perk, but now there are many more snipers that can not only compete with, but also exceed the DPS of Conspiracy Honed, which was a major outlier in terms of sniper DPS. But we're going to get into all that soon enough. To keep everything on a fair playing field, I'm going to test everything with just 200 weapon, no other buffs. To start, let's do some baseline tests. I'm just going to dump a mag of each frame with rewind rounds, since that is around the amount of rounds you would normally get off in a practical setting. There's one last frame we've got to address before we analyze perk pools, and that is Destiny's only dynamic heat sniper, Conspiracy Honed. Conspiracy Honed is a 140 RPM sniper that, thanks to its dynamic heat weapon frame, deals an extra 49% damage to bosses intrinsically compared to other rapid fire snipers. On top of that, it has double damage perks in the form of Vorpal weapon, paired with either firing line, which is my personal preference for ease, or bait and switch, and an origin trait that provides an additional up to 10.5% damage bonus while above 50% heat. So essentially, it is a sniper that inherits the best sniper damage profile, has 4 damage perks, and has dynamic heat limiter, which allows you to dump 13 rounds in a row. From a design standpoint, Conspiracy Honed is probably one of the most unbalanced weapons in the game. To provide a reference point for the baseline tests, I'm also going to test Conspiracy Honed with all of its damage perks active, and Whisper of the Worm with Whisper Breathing active, so you can see just how broken this gun really is, and just how good other snipers need to be to compete with it. Looking at this table, we can see that Conspiracy Honed greatly outperforms even a heavy weapon that was once a titan of the sandbox. Now these are just base damage numbers without damage perks, but even the most damaging of these frames would need a combination of damage increases that amounts to a whopping 72% in order to just match Conspiracy Honed. Even if Conspiracy does not have surges, and the sniper it is competing against has 3 surges active, the competing sniper still needs an additional 41% damage boost to match Conspiracy Honed. And remember, that is just for rapid fire frames. The other slightly worse frames need even more help to keep up. This is where Redirection comes in, since it is the only damage perk that exceeds 40% that rolls on snipers. There are 7 snipers that can roll with Redirection. Since adaptive frames are worst in terms of DPS, the only adaptive frames we will be looking at are 1000 Yard Stare and Embraced Identity, which both have the same spicy roll of Vorpal weapon plus Redirection. For aggressive frames, something in the kinetic slot has Redirection and the ability to get Accelerated Assault for an additional 6% damage boost. I do not have that roll, so I will be using Succession to analog it. Tatara Gaze has rewind rounds, Redirection, and an origin trait that provides up to a 13% damage bonus. However, that requires using Black Armory weapons. Lance Ephemeral is the only rapid fire sniper with Redirection, and it can pair it with rewind rounds. Besides Redirection snipers, the only sniper that can possibly compete with Conspiracy in terms of DPS is Praedyth's Revenge, since it has Elemental Honing, a 40% damage buff on kinetic weapons, combined with kinetic tremors and the Time Lost Magazine origin trait to push it over the edge. However, that is only in situations where Praedyth would have 3 kinetic surges and Conspiracy would have none. With all that said, let's get to testing. So we did it. We got higher damage numbers than Conspiracy. That means it's not the best sniper in the game anymore, right? Well, not quite. For one, you're not always going to have the time, patience, or ads necessary to stack up a lot of redirection stacks, and 5 times elemental honing is not much more convenient either. On top of that, unlike Conspiracy, none of these other snipers are able to maintain these DPS numbers for the entirety of their reserves. If your sniper is your primary method of DPS, for example if you're the team's tractor cannon player, or if you need supplemental damage for an extended period of time, say for anything more than a single magazine, then Conspiracy Honed is easily still the best option. Remember, any sniper not on this list is incapable of outdamaging Conspiracy, even if you would have surges for that sniper and not Conspiracy. Seriously, go get this gun if you don't have it, it's ridiculous. Now if that's the case, then what's the point of any of this? Well, I like to know shit, so that's the first thing, but also these snipers definitely do still have a niche as burst supplemental damage. Basically, anytime you're damaging a boss and there's not enough time left in the damage window for your heavy to be effective, such as if your gun's not reloaded, or if it would take too long for your rockets to reach the boss, that's where these come in. Now I personally would probably still not go through the trouble of using Redirection unless I was surge matching with my heavy weapon, or I was able to get surges from my sniper through the effects of something like Sanguine Alchemy, but a perfect use case for one of these snipers is a boss like Oryx. Typically we damage Oryx with rockets, which take a long time to reach him, so it's better to shoot a sniper towards the end of your rotation rather than continuing to shoot rockets that just won't connect. On top of that, Oryx Final Stand is very fast, and there usually isn't enough time to shoot more than a rocket or two, so that's another perfect time to use the sniper. I'm on Strand here, so I get 4 times Strand surges for Lance Ephemeral, and there are plenty of ads around with plenty of downtime, so Redirection isn't an issue either. This is one scenario where it would be better to use a Redirection sniper over Conspiracy. Is this a micro optimization? Absolutely, but you probably wouldn't be watching this video if you didn't care about micro optimizations. Now for a bit of fun. You may have noticed on that table that Vorpal Redirection 1000 yard stare was a bit of an outlier, so we're going to juice it up with every buff under the sun to see just how crazy a special sniper can get. We've got a Boots of the Assembler Well for a 35% empowering buff, a 30% debuff from Tractor Cannon that becomes a 35% debuff thanks to Expanding Abyss, a 15% buff from Sniper's Meditation, a 15% buff from Darcy, a 15% buff from Parasite, a 10% buff from Sanguine Alchemy, on top of 4 times surges, which equate to another 25% buff, a 10% buff from the support auto damage bonus, and lastly, a 5% damage buff from the Glaive Bubble. I also get a reload from Suppressing with Child of the Old Gods, which allows me to shoot 2 more shots than I normally would. Combined with our damage perks, the shots with Sniper's Meditation times 5 are dealing just over 10 times the damage of a regular unbuffed adaptive frame shot. I could have even pushed it slightly further, but I was not aware at the time of getting the clip that Deadfall Tether is boosted to a 40% weaken with Expanding Abyss.
Oh.
So yeah, a calm 11k DPS for a special weapon. For comparison, here is Conspiracy Hone with most of the buffs you would typically have in a real damage phase. Boots well once again, attractive for debuff, Surges, Sanguine, and Sniper's Meditation.